Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. For me, Season 6 of Rick and Morty is the year that the show went from a really buzzed about one that I heard about online constantly, to feeling kind of invisible. Having said that, I'm sure that's not the case with everyone. In today's online landscape, everyone's personalized interests and niches are carved up in a million different ways. So I'm sure for some people they had a completely different experience where they were just bombarded with Season 6 posts all the time. I can confidently say though that despite having discussed this show a lot in the past, that just wasn't the case for me. Sure, it feels like the hype and conversation around the show has been declining ever since Season 3, when it reached its inescapable peak and all that annoying McDonald's stuff happened, but 6 was the first time, at least for me, where it felt truly under-discussed. I thought that was worth highlighting at the top of this video, just because I found it interesting, but here's the thing. Overall, I think this was a pretty strong season of Rick and Morty. I thought it was more consistent than the last couple of years, but I think there is something holding it back from really reaching the pinnacle of those early seasons. And that's part of what I wanted to talk about here. So let's get into it. I want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Oh, and consider this a spoiler warning for the season.
Whoa, you found me! I shoot the first monitor too. Listen, I'm not here. Or am I?
I'm definitely going to talk about the episodes individually, but before I get there, I want to talk about where the show is at as a whole. Season 6 represents the third batch of 10 in the massive 70 episode order that Adult Swim made back in 2018. Back in the early days of making Season 4, the show's production was delayed time and time again because of the constant writing revisions. Arguably, this constant focus on rewriting helped the show in those early years, even as it frustrated both the animators and the fans. I think in Seasons 4 and 5, you can clearly see the show adjusting to a new writing style, with many new writers coming in. There were some growing pains there, for sure, and some of those episodes I just don't think really stack up. In Season 6 though, I think the show seems to be working like a well-oiled machine. There's no huge delays, and there's a pretty consistent level of quality. Co-creator Dan Harmon even spoke about how he's changed his approach, saying, "I'm letting go of my compulsive aversion to serialization. I'm letting younger writers who are fans of the show, if they tell me we need to address evil Morty, I believe them. People don't like my whimsical, let's make Morty's sperm big stories that are self-contained. They want a little more soap opera." With co-creator Justin Roiland adding, "We want the show to have both. I still think every season should have a good amount of point of entry episodes, which are just like an episode where you can show a friend that's never seen the show." I think for the most part, they accomplished this in Season 6. It feels like a very fan-friendly season written by a lot of very talented people. But while I think it hit a level of consistency that the show has rarely achieved, I'm not sure if it's a season with many absolute standouts either. The lows aren't nearly as low as this show can hit. Like, I think every episode here clears, say, that Voltron Goodfellas episode from last season with ease. But I'm not sure there's one that would crack my top 5 either. This probably sounds like damning the show with faint praise, but I'm not sure if it is. At this point, Rick and Morty is an aging comedy, and being able to consistently turn out quality stuff this deep into its run is no small feat. Most shows are not It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So yeah, while I don't think there was anything on the level of Total Recall or Vat of Acid here, I did find plenty to enjoy. The premiere was solid enough, but looking back on it, I think it's kind of funny how much they teased the Rick Prime stuff here, only for the majority of the season to not really focus on it much until the finale, which sets up another season of dealing with it. I don't really mind that too much, because it's not like the best of Rick and Morty is super serialized. It's not really what I come to the show for, but it did make for kind of an oddly constructed season. Episodes 2 and 3 were pretty good. I especially liked the universe of the VR game that saw Rick trying to convince the NPCs that they're all part of Morty, but that he's not trying to start a religion. One thing that the show has always been pretty good at, and this season featured more examples of it, like the Sun Knights later on, is setting up these massive worlds with characters who take their world very seriously, living through real consequences, huge moments of loss and grief, only to have Rick treat it all like an annoying background annoyance and run through their world like a bull in a china shop. They've gone to that well quite a bit, but the VR game was maybe one of the best examples of it. The Die Hard stuff with Summer in the episode, it was fine. I enjoyed the Hans Gruber alien, thought he was funny, but I think the show leaned on the pop culture references a little too much this season, including something that I'll touch on later. Episode 3 wasn't that memorable to me, though it did add Space Beth to the regular cast, which is actually a pretty big deal, and I'm interested to see how long that sticks. Now, Night Family was the episode where things really started clicking into gear. Maybe not top tier Rick and Morty, but still very enjoyable. It felt like a classic Rick and Morty setup, with the family's laziness and corner cutting immediately working against them. The car chase sequence was really fun, and I really liked Jerry and Night Jerry almost saving the day here. Their pen pal discussions of Tori Amos really got me. This one had a great end credit sequence too. I also liked the 5th one, the fortune cookie episode, quite a bit as well. And look, I know I'm not the first guy to say this, but the show leaning on incest as shock comedy has gotten pretty old and really off-putting. I could have done without that whole Jerry and his mom thing, especially since the show seems to think it's funny enough to sustain like the entire first 5 to 8 minutes of the episode. But overall, I did really like this one. Jerry and Rick getting paired up on an adventure together almost always works well for me, and the Fortune 500 concept was funny and lent itself to a lot of well-animated comedic action. Oh, and I have to give this episode a shout out for mentioning the Taxi theme so much. Taxi is awesome, it's where Danny DeVito got his start on TV. I really hope this episode gets more people to check it out. Anyway, back to shows that aren't from almost 50 years ago. I did like Jurassic Mort, the dinosaur episode. I thought it was a step down from the previous two, but still pretty solid. I know when I mentioned an over-reliance on pop culture references earlier, a lot of you probably thought I was talking about the Star Wars stuff in the finale, but it was really this episode where it felt the most out of place. The Wendy Williams and Joe Rogan scenes didn't add much, and I thought they were both pretty broad and obvious jokes. I don't know, it just felt a little too Family Guy for Rick and Morty to me. I'll admit that's a fairly small gripe. The premise of the episode is great, and it gave Keith David so much good material as the president. Honestly, I think the president was kind of the breakout character of the season. Obviously, he's been around for a long time, but he had multiple episodes here where he plays a huge role, and David is such a good voice actor that he's able to make the absolute most of it. Full meta Jack Rick was maybe the biggest swing the show took this season, with it diving headfirst into breaking the fourth wall, and I thought it was really clever, but maybe not the most funny episode here. I did like how disgusted Rick was with all the fourth wall breaking, and how it caters to 7 TV critics who won't even like it. That felt like not only a commentary on previous episodes like this, but some of the more meta episodes of Harmon's previous show, Community, as well. I kinda wish they had figured out a more interesting way to use Joseph Campbell though. I was excited when they first introduced him, but I didn't think the episode actually had that much to say about Campbell. Though I'll admit him begging the hacky writer to stop writing altogether was a pretty great gag. Analyze Piss and a Rick in King Mortar's Mort were fine. Piss was probably the better of the two. It took the Pissmaster, this goofy urine-themed Green Goblin type, and really leaned into how one-dimensional he was, and then immediately stripped that away and revealed him to be a really sad man looking for purpose with an estranged family. That was just exactly the kind of thing that I come to this show for, and it's something the show has pulled off well again and again. I will say outside of that, the episode was really predictable though, especially after Rick took over as the Pissmaster. And honestly, I just have no strong feelings on the Sun Knight episode. It was fine, and I think it did a good job writing Morty both like a jaded adventurer who has seen it all and an immature 14-year-old who's way in over his head. Really though, I think when we look back on it, this episode will mostly just be remembered as the one with the fake robot Rick. That was a good reveal for the last episode, and I thought this finale was pretty satisfying overall. It didn't feel quite as huge or important as previous Rick and Morty finales, especially on like a story level, but it was really funny, and I think that's always going to be the most important aspect of the show for me. I actually thought the Star Wars stuff was used pretty well. The president slowly revealing how obsessed and angry about the franchise he was pretty great, but I really loved the premise just being what happens if you drop a lightsaber straight down. It's such a simple idea, like something that kids would argue about at recess, and they just blow it out to ridiculous proportions. I didn't think there was any big emotional gut punches to be found here, unlike some of the other finales, but comedically, it was just a rock solid episode throughout. I am interested to see where they decide to take the Rick Prime stuff, but they save most discussion of him until the very end. Like I said, after that premiere, it kind of felt like a bait and switch. I don't have much of a problem with that, but I can easily picture people who are more like into the lore of Rick and Morty not being thrilled by it. Still, like I said, when taken as a whole, I enjoyed this season quite a bit. I will say it took me a while to make a video on this one for one reason. I don't think there's quite as much to dig into here as many past seasons. There weren't any baffling lows or extreme highs that I never saw coming. So my biggest takeaway from this season was a pretty simple one. Rick and Morty has settled into a comfortable middle-aged groove. Look, as hard as it is to accept, none of us will ever be hyper-intelligent dinosaur geniuses, but that doesn't mean we can't keep improving. A great way to do that is with things like Calculus in a Nutshell on Brilliant. As intimidating as it might sound, this course actually starts with concrete and simple examples and helps build your calculus skills from there, making it actually fun to learn this stuff. That's where Brilliant shines, helping you tackle math, science, and computer science concepts in a highly interactive way. There's thousands of lessons here, with new ones being added constantly, and spending just 30 minutes or so a day on them is both fun and builds our skills, without any of the stress that you might remember associating with these topics. Plus, with Brilliant, you can really learn and dig into this stuff without breaking the bank or taking out some predatory loans, all on your schedule. So go to brilliant.org/midnight and try it for free, and the first 200 people to go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. That's brilliant.org/midnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.